I'm a native Angelino and a U.S. Army veteran, and I'm also Jewish. I currently serve as the Director of Community Safety and Belonging at the Jewish Federations of North America. As a man, a transgender man,
I was born and raised primarily in Los Angeles. I come from a diverse family. So my mother's side of the family is from Panama. My dad's side of the family is from the South. So when I think about my childhood, it was family gatherings with both sides of the family, there being salsa and merengue playing, different types of music. My dad's Baptist, my mother's Episcopalian, so I think my Jewish journey has looked very different. I mean, everybody's Jewish journey looks different, but my Jewish journey in particular started when I was about 13. I was having an after-school conversation with a very good friend, and we were talking about religions, and he said, well, just become Jewish. And my response was like, I can't become Jewish. There's no such thing as a black Jew. And it's funny because like today, when we think about who is Jewish, oftentimes the thought is that everybody's Ashkenazi of European descent. The person I was having this conversation with was Iranian in descent. So it's like from one marginalized Jew to now another marginalized Jew. Back when I was 13, this conversation of course you can be Jewish, just be Jewish. But once I got out of high school is when I started seeking out the synagogues that I wanted to go to. While my journey started when I was 13, it's an ongoing process of discovery and rediscovery of what being Jewish means for me today. I graduated from high school and went to college and did 1 year, and more than anything else was a little bit bored with being on a college campus, and had always wanted to serve in the military and saw it as an opportunity to shift gears. Not everybody can say that they've served, and that was something that really appealed to me, is just being a member of a small group of our population that supports safety and security of our country.
I think that Nate is uniquely qualified to think about safety and security for our community, largely from his experience in the military.
I think that being a young person during Hurricane Katrina, being a young soldier, I had a different lens at that time. I was in the Louisiana National Guard at the time as a military police soldier, and the National Guard supports local law enforcement with evacuation efforts prior to a hurricane. And my unit was part of that sort of support response. And so essentially what ended up happening was my group went from Jackson Barracks after the levees broke to the Superdome. And so it was a really interesting time, because to be a young soldier and see the impact of a major event like that on sometimes people that I even knew was something that stuck with me my entire life. There was a real sense of community safety or community building, and it kind of set a tone because you're still able to find the humanity to help someone else. So there was a lot of that. Somebody coming in from the water and another person helping them bring their belongings in. Or I had the opportunity to hold a newborn baby that had been born during the hurricane. So it really showed the spans of humanity and what it looks like to stand up for a complete stranger. And I think that's something that I think about today, and how I move through the world. After we finished with that, my unit went to Iraq. I really credit my time in the military with informing how I move through the world now. My worldview is completely different after experiencing being in another country that's engaged in a wartime environment. You'd get ready to roll out the gate and the unit in front of us would get hit. Or we'd get through the gate and the unit that was coming in behind us would get hit. And so, your sense of safety is different. There's a delicateness to life. And I felt it more when I was in the Middle East and when I was in Iraq than when I was in New Orleans.
I think that Nate draws upon the experience of being in the military and the National Guard to think about safety and security through a lens of also understanding his own experience as an individual of color and as a transgender Jew.
even before I got back from Iraq, I was already clear that my gender transition was something that was on the horizon. I did my process here in LA. And it's not something that you can wake up one day and say, okay, I'm going to transition, and then immediately have a prescription for testosterone or anything like that. It takes months, months of initial therapy before I could even access hormones. One of the most significant memories that I have of that time period of transitioning was when one of my great aunts started using my chosen name. And I was like, how is it that someone that's in their 70s or 80s is able to get this and figure it out? I was expecting it to be some sort of like big catastrophic conversation when I called my father. I was really, really nervous about telling him. And he just kind of was like, okay. Like, I kind of already had that idea. I just was waiting for you to come around. And I was like, well, that was underwhelming. His biggest concern was about my personal safety.
You know, what an individual goes through when it comes to gender identity and transitioning can be different for each and every individual. What that looks like and how that manifests. And the most important thing is that we're able to see people and identify them for how they wish to be seen and identified.
BCC, Beth Chaim Hadashim, is the world's oldest LGBTQ synagogue. It was probably one of my first landing spots when I got out the military. First thing I did was find my Jewish community, and that's where I landed. And I think that synagogues like that are really important for Jews that may not have support at home. And so it's crucial to have spaces like that so that there's a place to celebrate the wins. I think during the AIDS epidemic, synagogues like BCC were the main ones doing funerals for people that died from AIDS and HIV-related illnesses when their own people from their families weren't showing up for them. So it's a really important piece of not only LGBTQ Jewish history, but what it means to create a place where people feel like they belong and can be their authentic selves.
I would say that Beth Chaim Hadashim has done groundbreaking work in supporting young trans community members, and through our partnership with JQ's trans programming, we have been able to offer a whole host of annual programs in partnership that have really reached larger numbers as a result.
One of the things within the North American Jewish community that we are always concerned about is the sense of belonging and ensuring that everybody feels like they belong in our community. And when someone is misgendered or seen as not Jewish, they might only go to that synagogue once and never go back again. And so what does that do to the strength of our Jewish community as a whole?